Fat Puppy here, and I am on the location of the old V.B. Williams furniture plant. Now this originally started in 1925, mid-1920s, as the O.L. Williams top and panel plant. It was a wood plant, a wood mill basically. And then it started into making furniture, and at some point Von Bassett bought into it and became known V.B. Williams. It's on Fulton Street in Sumter. It closed down in 2004 after almost 80 years of production, and with it came the layoff of 350 employees. This happened when the Chinese flooded our markets with cheap furniture. And the building's in very bad disrepair now. As a matter of fact, I don't know that you can tell or not, but it looks like they're tearing down part of it. You can see windows that go to open air. And I will show you another picture in a little bit. But Mr. Oliver Lafayette Williams is the gentleman that built this plant. And he figures prominently, the money from this plant figures prominently in the building of a nationally known college football stadium. So here it is behind me. Over there was the office, and over here was the plant area, and it just went all through there. Oliver Lafayette Williams again had his place built, and there's a road, not this one here, this is Fulton, but over there is Lafayette Street, which I am sure was named after Mr. Oliver Lafayette Williams. Now Lafayette Road, street, whatever it is, was actually built as a bypass. I don't know, I guess in the 1950s, probably early 1950s, to get around Sumter. It's actually only about, I don't know, 4 blocks from downtown. I mean, now you drive through, it's just like you're driving through Sumter, but when it was originally built, it was a bypass. Behind me here is the home that Mr. Oliver Williams lived in before he passed away. This is also the home of his daughter and his son-in-law. So yes, this was the home of Mr. O.L. Williams. It belonged to his daughter and his son-in-law, the Williams-Brice family, as a matter of fact. It is now a county museum. It's the Sumter County Museum. It's a lot of traffic because it's almost downtown, but from what I understand at one time, this had 10 acres attached to it. But like I said, it's just a kind of a old neighborhood around here, a well-kept neighborhood, and the hospital actually is right across the street. But this is open to the public. You can come and visit anytime. So before I get into the meat of this, I just want to give you a little bit of background information. I already showed you the furniture plant for O.L. Williams, which became V.B. Williams. Right next to it that I didn't show you was another furniture plant built by Chester Corn. Corn Industries, which was also known as Sumter Cabinet. They both built high-end furniture. Excuse me. Lumber built most of the industry in this town early on was lumber. You had the Corn family, the Williams family, Williams-Brice family, and then you had the Shaw family. And there are different, even now there's Shaw lumber, Shaw manufacturing. The Shaw family is still somewhat in the lumber business, but those were the ones that they were the earliest manufacturing plants in Sumter. When Chester Corn built his plant, it was designated or meant to be a higher paying place to work, which I guess it was for a while. In later years it wasn't, because more highly technical things come along that more money was made in that. I talked to a guy once who worked at the corn plant and corn manufacturing. He was an old fella, and he'd been there pretty much his whole working life. And I asked him, I said, so you've been here your whole life, how come you haven't left and maybe tried to find a better job? And he said, I'm perfectly happy where I'm at. And that was all he said about that. But it got me to thinking, you know, back in the day, people didn't job hop. They found them a job and they stuck with it. And I think this was due to poverty at the time. This was due to the fact that most people I'm talking about now were born right after the Great Depression, and so they grew up in extreme poor conditions because of the Great Depression. It reminds me of my own dad. To my knowledge, he only had 2 jobs. Now, he had a lot of side jobs, but he only had 2 jobs. He was a milkman for a while, and then he worked for the city, and the city is what he retired from. But he also did side jobs. He worked, I don't know, as a security guard. He did deliveries. He was a bit of a hustler, trying to make that extra cash. But he only had 2 jobs. And that's just the way the old timers were back then, because once they got a job, they wanted to hold on to it, and they didn't want to take a chance on having nothing. So with that being said, we're going to get to the meat of this now. Williams-Brice. If you're a football fan, you probably recognize that. If you're from this area, you probably recognize those names. Williams-Brice Stadium is the stadium for the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina. Now, the story of how it was built. There's a gentleman by the name of Thomas Bryce that was built in 1902, and he died in 1969. He was a football player for University of South Carolina in the 1920s. As a matter of fact, he is credited with losing a game by fumbling a ball when they were playing Clemson. Martha Williams was born in 1904, and she also died in 1969, the same year that Thomas Bryce died. Martha Williams was the daughter of Oliver Williams that had that furniture plant I was telling you about. So she had a lot of money that was left to her, and she was in the business. She had married Thomas Bryce. He had a lot of money, and so they both died the same year, 1969. I haven't been able to find out what they died from, because they weren't really that old. They were like, what, 65, 66, 67, something like that. Not really that old. So University of South Carolina needed a new stadium. This is back in the late 1960s, like I said. And Thomas Bryce and Martha Williams-Brice had left it in their will, bequeathed $3 million to be given to University of South Carolina for the purpose of building a stadium. Now, the story here is that the tax laws at that time, and they may be the same now, I don't know, would not have allowed that. So they had to circumvent the tax laws. It took an act of Congress, honestly. And the lawyer that was, or group of lawyers, I'm sure, that was over that to make sure that it happened, got with Strom Thurmond, Senator of South Carolina, and he slipped it into a bill that they would he slipped it into a bill that they would get a pass on this and would not have to worry about the taxes involved. Now, you know, it's a thing in the news. It's kind of a joke now about how Congress, they don't read the bill anyway. And after the bill passed, that's what he said. He said, I slipped it in a bill because I know nobody ever reads it. So that is how Williams-Brice Stadium was built. It's built by the money of the Williams-Brice family, $3 million, which people say now that wouldn't even buy the concession area. But it was built to be able to hold 72,440 people. Additions were added later, but to make it nicer and to expand the seating, but it's only been expanded to 80,000. So a majority of what you see when you see Williams-Brice Stadium was built by the Williams-Brice family money back in the early 1970s. This is her monument, her marker. And next to it is his monument, his marker. I think it's kind of funny that the man who made it all possible, Mr. Williams himself, Oliver Lafayette Williams, that's his marker. Compared to the other two I just showed you, it's small. It's in a line with these 3 right here. You see these in every cemetery you go to, and I hate seeing them. These are the children of Mr. Oliver Lafayette Williams, who died young. They died the same year. Larry, 1901. Janie, 1901, just a few months apart from each other, even though they were about 6 years in age difference. You know, back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, childhood diseases were a big thing, and they were killing people left and right.